From Moscow to Belgorod, the Ukrainians keep launching what can be considered militarily futile terrorist attacks against Russia. But why? Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and let's talk about this the subject. I think not a lot of people talk about why. Most people talk about what happened, and again, pure speculation on my part. The Crocus City Hall attack, attacks on Russian infrastructure, attacks on Russian civilian locations, etc., from Ukraine. Now, let's talk about this. Why it's going on. Number one, I'll say this. You got to start here from the perspective of military value, right? Because that's what that's the first discussion of this is this. These things have no military value, right? That, you can bomb a building in Belgorod, you can kill a bunch of soldiers, civilians anywhere, you can blow up a bus, etc. But it does not change the outcome on the battlefield. So what's the point, right? Which is a reasonable argument. What is the point of doing it if it doesn't change the outcome on the battlefield? So let's start with that. What's the point of doing it if it doesn't change that? Because I think that's the first question that comes to people's minds, right? Why? And then they, talk about, well, they just hate Russians, blah, blah, blah. All right. I'm going to start with a foundational premise, and the answer will come from that foundational premise. And they're not saying that it's right or wrong, good or bad, correct or incorrect. But again, with me, it's always an intellectual exercise. It's always simply a matter of, let's think about this. Let's have a philosophical discussion. Not saying it's true, false, right, or wrong, but I'm going to throw some things out there. I have always argued that I don't see Ukraine as a country. I don't recognize Ukraine as a country, right? Any more than if I take a knife and I'm attacking you with that knife, I recognize that knife as an independent actor. If I have a gun and I shoot you, that gun is not an independent, are weapons that I utilize. Now you can talk about my motivations for using the gun, my tactics, my overall strategy, if I even have one for using the weapon. But notwithstanding the discussion of why or how or what outcome I want, or even if I have an outcome I want to use the weapon, the reality is this: it's just a weapon. A knife is, as people know, I've been into boating for my entire life. You're on a boat, you need to have a knife, and it needs to be really, 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 really sharp, right? So yes, I have several knives, and when I'm on a boat, I'm always going to have a knife. In fact, in my backpack, I'm always going to have things like a Leatherman. Some people know what a Leatherman is, or I'm going to have one of these knives that's a multi-tool, right? Always going to have that in my backpack. Why? Because I view a knife as a tool, right? Now, can that tool become a weapon? Sure. But if you study self-defense, anything can be a weapon, right? Salt can be a weapon if I can throw it in your eyes. If you throw me to the ground and you're jumping on me, I can grab sand and throw sand in your eyes and utilize that, right? Anything I get, or defensive weapon, right? You're attacking me with a knife. What happens if I fall on the ground and stick my feet up with leather soles? I can then both attack you with my feet, and it's harder for you to stab. I've got some level of protection. So those things that I can use to attack or protect or whatever are nothing but tools. The knife is a tool. I can use that tool any way I want. I can cut a tomato with it. I can cut a rope. Oh my God, we're tied off to so-and-so. Cut the rope. It better be sharp. Cut the rope, right? Excuse me. Let me just remind everybody this. I shouldn't have said that. If you're ever do any boating with people who are professional boaters, never say the word rope. That's a sign of a landlubber. You want to say line, cut the line. Never say cut the rope, say cut the line. Hand me the lines, untie the lines. Always say lines on the boat, or you're going to sound like you're green. You're going to sound like a tenderfoot. You're going to sound like a landlubber, right? But my point being this, I get all that to say this. The knife is a tool. It can be used for good. It can be used for evil. It can be used for anything in between. It can be used for those two things at the same time. Can I use knife for good and evil at the same time? A weapon? Yes, I can. If you're attacking me, I can use it to stab you, which on its face seems evil. But if you're attacking me and I'm saving 3 little children, aren't I using it for good? Okay. All that discussion gets us back here. I view Ukraine as a tool for the neocons. Why do you think they use the term Ukraine project? It is a project, which means, and it's not a project in and of itself. Ukraine is a tactic as part of a greater strategy. See, when we talk about that, when people say, why is it that the neocons don't seem to have a strategy in Ukraine? Right? It's like they don't know what to do next. Oh my God, we're going to start the war in Ukraine. And then after starting the war in Ukraine, Russia's going to fall apart and crumble. And then on we go. Why? Well, wait a minute. Because Ukraine was never a strategy. A strategy was never needed for Ukraine. You don't need a strategy for a tool. A tool is generally part of a tactic. Right? It's part of a tactic used in an overall strategy. So the neocons never had a strategy for Ukraine because they didn't feel like they needed a strategy for Ukraine because Ukraine was a tactic in a larger strategy. So never get fooled into wondering why the neocons, the imperialists, the warmongers, the globalists, whatever term you have, never get fooled into thinking that they're stupid and they didn't have a strategy in Ukraine because they're stupid, or they really have one. They're playing 3D chess. They're much smarter than we, and they're going to do this. No, they didn't. You don't need a strategy. It was a tactic in a larger strategy, which is to rule the world. You know, the evil mad scientists, we're going to rule the world. How are you going to do that? Well, one of our tactics is we're going to expand to Russia. Then we'll utilize Ukraine to take out Russia. Then we'll control Russia. We'll put a puppet government in. We'll control all those natural resources. Then we go after China. Anybody else? Well, India's looking a little froggy. I think they want to be a world power. They got to go. How about Iran? Same with them. Brazil. Well, it's insanity, but it's insanity as part of a strategy to rule the world. Completely, you know, Fourth Reich-esque, shall we say, right? Or maybe the third 3.1 Reich. Okay. So now that we know that they didn't have a strategy in Ukraine because Ukraine is a tactic in a larger strategy, what about these terrorist attacks? Well, if Ukraine is in fact nothing but a tool for the neocons and it is tactic in a larger strategy, that means that Ukraine does not have independence. That means that Ukraine, I'll put it to you like this. Will they give it the appearance of independence? Yes. Will they go on? Let me tell you where the independence of Ukraine is in the New York Times and the Washington Post. In the narrative, they want to create a belief that Ukraine is sovereign, is democratic, which means independent. So they have to always argue, make false arguments, faux arguments that Ukraine is independent in order to maintain the absurd narrative that it's both a democracy and a sovereign nation. They can't come out and say, nah, they can't do whatever they want. It's not even really a country. What did we learn? Think about this. In the discussion, the release discussion, a lot can be taken from this. The discussion that was released regarding the Germans, talking about using their missiles to attack the Russians. They kind of let the cat out of the bag there, because what they said was, we got to basically maintain plausible deniability. We can't do like the French and the British do, where we just go in there, no holds barred, don't even try to hide it, right? They also made it clear that something that we already knew, and that is that the more complicated weapons, like Storm Shadow missiles, like the various, HIMARS and all these kind of things, that they didn't say HIMARS, but it's clear because HIMARS is, these weapons that the West has, that it considers its better weapons. It simply sends its own people in to operate them, right? And Russia and Germany was like having that discussion about, plausible deniability, and how the French, the Germans, whoever the hell, they don't even try to hide it. They just send their people over there and fire the missiles at Russia. Okay. What else do we know about that? What else have we heard? We have heard from Ukrainians that, as they call it, the West, meaning the US and its vassals, choose the targets, assist them with targeting. So now what does that tell us about these terrorist attacks? And they even said they have to clear their targets through the West. So then what do we know about these terrorist attacks? Think about this. We have learned that the NATO, the US, NATO has to approve the targets. We have learned that NATO operates the weapons that fire at the targets. We have learned that NATO does the targeting. So they are involved in approving the targets, which means they choose the targets, in the targeting, the machinations of targeting, and firing at the targets. So ask yourself, why is Ukraine targeting Russia? Well, if NATO's approving the targets / choosing the targets, if NATO is doing the technical targeting itself, and then firing the weapons, then that's something a little different, actually, than using Ukraine as a tool. It's something even different. It is something more assertive and aggressive, right? It's putting Ukraine out there to give the appearance that Ukraine is a tool so they can launch direct attacks on Russia. That's what it is. This is the UK, this is the US, this is France, this is Germany launching direct attacks on Russia from the Ukrainian territory. That's what it is. This is not Ukraine. Let's be honest about what it is. If NATO says, here's the target, or approves the target, if NATO says, all right, let's get the targeting data, if they say, okay, here's our guys, here's the weapons, get out of the way, we're firing at them, then it is NATO using the ground, the land of Ukraine, to launch attacks on Russia. So don't ask yourself, why is Ukraine doing it? Does it have what a military a benefit does it have for Ukraine? Ukraine ain't part of the conversation. It is NATO saying, all right, Ukraine, yeah, here's what we need you to do. Get the hell out of the way. We're launching some attacks on Russia. That's what it is. Russia, that's why Russia has come to a point where they said, look, you're going to launch attacks from Ukraine on us. Okay? You're going to do that. You're asking for it. Now, what does that mean? The recent attack on Belgorod, my understanding was a Tachka-U, which is a Soviet-era missile that, I could be wrong, I believe that's what it was, a Tachka-U. So basically, the Russians have said, look, we know what the hell you're doing. Just don't give us this, it's Ukraine crap. We know, you know, everybody knows this ain't Ukraine. You are using the territory of Ukraine to launch attacks on us. That's why the hell we went to war in the first place, because we knew that Ukraine was a launch pad for attacks on us, that you expanded up to our border. That's Russia's position. You expanded up to our border so that you could put missile, they know, and the Russians knew it. No, it starts with this, and then next thing you know, there's nukes in Ukraine, and that ain't happening. So Russia's position was, we knew all along this was what the plan was, and now you're doing it. And now what we're telling you is, if you're going to use Ukraine as a platform to launch attacks on us, we're going to no longer play the game with you, where we all pretend that it's Ukraine. You've admitted that you're doing the targeting. You've admitted that you're doing the firing. You've admitted that you're launching attacks on the motherland from the Ukrainian territory. Let's not play this game anymore. If you're going to go to war with us, we're going to go to war with you. If you're going to punch us, we're going to punch back. We're not playing this game anymore. No more plausible deniability. That's where it's coming from as far as Russia's concerned. And so that's why the Tochka U attack. See, the game now is, oh crap, yeah, they've called us out, right? So how can we continue to do it? Well, all right, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll continue to do it, but we will let the Ukrainians actually do the attacks. We'll let the Ukrainians use the stuff that they have to actually do the attacks, because we're afraid if a Storm Shadow missile comes whistling into Russia, then a hypersonic missile is going to come whistling out of Russia in our direction, and they're probably right. So that being said, if in fact these attacks are simply NATO attacking Russia, it makes sense now from a military perspective. In the grand scheme of things, here's why. If you believe that it's Ukraine, that Ukraine is the impetus for that, Ukraine is the actor here, then you can ask the question. Ukraine is trying to win a war against Russia. There's a war of Ukraine versus Russia. It doesn't make a sense for Ukraine because it doesn't match the battlefield. You know, it's not going to help them on the battlefield. They could use those missiles to attack Russian military positions, which would be much more reasonable and sensible. It would make sense, right? You want to attack your enemy's military positions, weaken your enemy's military, because that's what they're using to attack your military, especially when you're getting your butts kicked. You're going to use those, and it makes sense, right? But in the context of Ukraine as a one front in an international war of domination for the U.S., then you can just attacking Russia is good enough. As far as the general war, if it's forget Ukraine. Ukraine is lost. They know it. Who cares, right? Now Ukraine's done. That's finished. But we can get some more punches in against Russia. We can upset Russia. We can, the plan being, well, you know how these people are. It's always the same plan. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to upset the Russian people. Then they'll get mad at Putin and overthrow Putin, right? So from that perspective, you want to keep hitting the Russian people so they'll get frustrated that their government can't protect them. And voila, they go after Putin, right? So these attacks on, these terrorist attacks on Russia, these attacks on the various civilian targets in Russia makes sense as part of an overall strategy of world domination. Let me say this. If you pay attention, what else happens? China's Belt and Road, right? And particularly in Pakistan, we've seen a number of things. We've seen terrorists, ISIS, right? ISIS. Attacks on, I remember one on a bus full of Chinese workers, killed a bunch of them, blowing up pipelines, part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So what happens? The U.S. empire is using terrorist attacks against the Belt and Road projects in Pakistan and around the world. Recently, there was a terrorist attack. Let me find it. There was another one. I'll find it right now. I wonder who was behind this one. Let me show you this one. Venezuela's interior minister denounces terrorist attack near CNE warehouses. Now, keep in mind something. ISIS, the bane of the U.S. empire's existence. Oh, we hate ISIS. ISIS has attacked Syria recently. ISIS has attacked Iran. ISIS, so-called, attacked Moscow in the Crocus attack. Isn't it interesting that the U.S. hates ISIS and is fighting ISIS, but for some strange reason, ISIS only attacks U.S. adversaries, Syria, Iran, Russia. ISIS, which the U.S. hates and is doing everything to fight against, always attacks on behalf of the U.S. empire. In fact, there was one instance where Israel bombed a place, some areas in Syria, and at the exact same times they launched bombings, ISIS launched what seemed like coordinated bombings on behalf of Israel. Israel bombed here, ISIS attacked here, almost like a coordination. Bottom line is the U.S. empire is a terrorist organization, and they're using terrorism. And here we go, Venezuela's terrorist attack, right? The CNE, for those who don't know, I've been to Venezuela. I've met with people from the CNE before. I've been to their offices. I've been to their events. It's their National Electoral Council. These are the people who handle the election, the national election of Venezuela, right? So they have acts of terrorism and sabotage perpetrated a few meters from the warehouses of the CNE, right? Just so you'll know, the warehouses, they have an election coming up, and the warehouses are where they have, different computers, different things that go out that they use for the elections, right? A fire was started 120 meters from the CNE warehouse, which is security zone. So bottom line, this is an act of terrorism. We're starting investigations. This is a security zone. We're going to take severe measures. The situation was controlled. So again, the U.S. is unhappy with Israel. Venezuela, because they won't do what they're told. The U.S. is not happy that let's see. Where are we? The U.S. is flying now. They're flying missions along the coast, war missions along the coast of Venezuela. Of course, Blinken and the madmen are trying to start war everywhere on this U.S. on the earth. Everywhere on the earth, these psychopaths are trying to start war. So now they're on the coast of Venezuela, flying missions, trying to start a war with Venezuela. That's the game now, right? Starting war everywhere on the world, from one end of this earth to the other. These people are insane. But again, what is it? Another terrorist attack. Isn't it interesting how the terrorists of this world, for some reason, all seem to focus on adversaries of the United States? It's almost like a strange coincidence. So let's put it to you like this. These attacks in Ukraine are nothing but U.S. attacks to try to weaken Russia. They got nothing to do with Ukraine. Ukraine is lost. Now, the only hope, the plan, in fact, for Ukraine is to drag more cannon fodder in there, right? The U.S.'s plan is now, since the war is lost with the Ukrainians, is to keep, the U.S. pushed for the latest mobilization. The Ukrainians were like, no, we don't want to do this. And the U.S. was like, yeah, really? I guess so, because you bastards are all going to die. And that's almost exactly the plan, right? Remember, Lindsey Graham to the last Ukrainian. So now the Ukrainians are saying, we don't want a mobilization. And the U.S. saying, what part of to the last Ukrainian didn't you get? Yes, the last Ukrainian. There are Ukrainians left. And that has to come to a screeching halt. That has to be dealt with. There's more Ukrainians. Let's get this thing going so we can get rid of these last few Ukrainians, which means we got Poles. I've been saying this for 2 years now. We got Poles. We got Romanians. Get rid of them. They're done. And then, of course, so we got Frenchmen, Brits, Spaniards, all of these people. So look, we need to get some train tracks straight up to the Donbass region. We need to put these European cannon fodder on there, and we need to ship them up so they can get mowed down. Their bodies can catch bullets just like anybody else. The U.S. empire is like, look, France, Germany, England, what you think? You think the bodies of your people can't catch bullets the same as Ukrainians and get torn apart by shrapnel? We got things we need to do, dude. We got worlds we need to overthrow. So let's come on. You think Macron is of his own volition saying, hey, let's send troops, let's do this, let's do that? No, let's not forget Tony Blinken came. Macron was like, look, we need to send a couple thousand soldiers. And everybody's like, oh, the U.S. doesn't want that. And then Blinken came and met with Macron and left. And you know what Macron said then? We really need to send soldiers. Because Blinken's like, hey, man, you got a lot of Frenchmen they're in the streets, and they're unhappy with the economy, and they're wearing yellow vests and all kinds of crap. Macron's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, they're kind of a pain in the neck, aren't they? Macron's like, yeah, they really are. So Blinken's like, let's ship them on up to the Donbass front and get them mowed down by machine gun fire. We can probably get 6 months out of these bastards. Macron's like, yeah, I hate them just as bad as you do. The rotten, baguette eating sons of bitches, every one of them. So screw them. Yes, and they high five. High five, bro. All right, let's get some of these beret wearing sons of bitches. Let's get them on a bus and let's get them out of here. But first, we got to soften up the turf, right? We got to like get it out there. We got to start talking about it. Now, Macron's like, yeah, you know, if the Russians start winning, God knows that ain't happening. I'm just saying, if that should change, and for some reason, this the great Ukrainian army should start having problems defending themselves, we just gonna have to step in and bring this thing to a halt. How you gonna do that? You know those Frenchmen that are in the street that are unhappy with my policies? Yeah, well, I think I know how to resolve their issues very quickly in a manner that they will never be unhappy with my policies or anybody else's. We will put them on a train, on a plane, we'll send them to the front, and we'll keep this war going. They're fueling it with the blood of Europeans. That's what they're doing. These cannon fodder people are fuel for the neocon war machine. That's all they are. That's it. These people that were running around Europe waving blue and yellow flags, they'll get what suckers get, right? That's what they're getting. I think some of them may be starting to wake up bit by bit, but it's too late for their economy. You know, their economy has already been sacrificed. And now you get a couple of things going on here. By launching these attacks, a couple of things. The plan, of course, the absurd plan is to weaken Russia, you know, pissing off the people at Putin, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But the other thing they get is this. They get to infuriate the Russians into really hating the Europeans, right? Because ultimately what you want to do is separate Russia and Europe. Ultimately what you want, they're looking at this. Look, after this thing is over, if the Russians and the Europeans come back together, that's going to be a problem for the neocons. They got themselves back into the same problem that they started off with, and that is Russia has cheap energy. Even though Europe is being deindustrialized and it's done, if somehow enough fences can be mended, they may not be mended much, but if they can be mended enough just to get those pipelines open back up and get the energy back into Europe, then Europe can reindustrialize, stop deindustrializing. It can get strong, and it's more dangerous than ever now because there's going to be elements in Europe that really understand that the U.S. is trying to screw them over, and they're really going to say, we got to get off of the U.S. Bandwagon. And a lot of those elements are going to come to power. So now the U.S. is saying, look, what can we do? Well, one of the things we can do is piss the Russians off so bad that they hate the Europeans and they won't come back and do business with them. So when the Europeans pick up the phone, hey, the war's over, Russia. Yeah. Yeah. How about that oil and gas? And Russians will be like, okay. Europeans will be like, we know you hate us and we don't blame you, but we all got to eat, dude. We all got to eat. Can we buy some gas and oil again? Here's the thing about the Russians. They're practical. And the Russians will say, all right, you've treated us like crap. We don't need to mend any fences and cultural. You don't need to start reading Dostoevsky. You don't need to start playing Russian operas again. You don't need to unrename Russian cats, right? You don't need to undo the freedom fries thing or whatever. No, none of that. But, you're right. We're all trying to eat. So here's what we'll do. They're going to give them, they'll be happy to give them different kind of contracts now. Don't think you're going to get the same good contract that you got before, but you can get gas and oil again. We'll sell it to you. We'll sell natural resources to you again. However, our focus is going to be east, but we got enough. We'll just sell it to you, but as long as you want to buy it. But don't think that if you wake up one day and get ready to cut it off again, that because we're not going to focus on you. The Russians will sell, they'll sell stuff to them. But what they won't do is they won't make that a significant part of their income. They'll just say, whatever you buy is left over. And the other part of it is this: we're going to give you a contract, pay up front. And you can give us all the damn money back, 300 billion, every dime of it. And you're going to give us the interest back. And you know what I mean? So they're going to have them over a barrel. And I think the new leadership that will be coming to power in Europe will be anti-American and will be basically pro-European. Hey, We need to eat, man. We can't just listen to these fools anymore. Well, they're in a bind though, and the only way that they can get out of that bind, and the Russians know it, is to get back to Russian energy, because the bind they're in is in stopping buying energy and fertilizer and all that thing from the Russians. They got to get it from the U.S. And while the U.S. says don't buy it from the Russians because the Russians will use it as a weapon, everybody knows the neocons will use it as a weapon. So all of these things coming together, that at some point, and it seems sooner rather than later, this neocon project is going to fall apart. The Europeans are going to be more than anybody else left holding the bag. And the Russians, being the practical people that they are, will be ready to talk. The Russians are always ready to talk. They're smart. They're always ready to talk. They're always ready to make a deal. It's like a businessman. A businessman's ready to make a deal. You know, it's like you understand people that don't understand business. You know, you walk into a restaurant and you say, I'd like this, this, and this, and the rest, and the waiter says, well, we can't add these two together. You say, look, this comes with shrimp and this. I'd also like this and this and this on my meal. Oh, the waitress says, we can't do that. You call the manager. Well, they're not business people. Well, we can't do that. I'm sorry. This meal only comes. They're not business people. You know what a business person will say? Yeah, we can do it. What do you need? Whatever you want. As long as you're willing to pay for it. See, a business person is going to say, you can call me names. You can curse me. You can do whatever you want to. We can do business as long as you're willing to pay, right? So now you go into a restaurant, you say, I want to add shrimp and lobster, this and this and this and that, blah, and I want all of these things. The person that doesn't understand business says, I'm sorry, we can't do that. That only comes with a salad. The person that understands business says, well, the dish that you're ordering is $39.95. We'd be happy to add all of those things, but it's going to come to $99.95. They're going to jack it up through the roof. If you're a person of the means to do that, they simply tell you ahead, oh, sir, sure, sir. You'd like to add shrimp and lobster and this. You'd like to add all of these things. Not a problem. Anything else you want the cook to do? Yes, tell them to braise this and burn this and brown that. Okay. And the meal, the entree that you ordered is $39.95. With those extras, that will take it up to $99.95. Is that okay with you? And the guy says, sure, that's great. $99.95. So what is it that they've realized? Ultimately, the outcome is we're here to make money. And we'll change whatever we need to change. We don't have to love this guy, right? We don't have to care about him. We're not bound to some menu. We're here to eat. We're trying to make money. He wants to eat. If you're willing to pay, he can eat. Right? I think that's how the Russians are. The Russians ain't got to love you. And when it's all said and done, the Europe will come back to Russia and all the crap and everything they've done to Russia, all the stuff they've done. And the Russians aren't going to say, we won't take your money. And the U.S. knows the Russians. They understand the Russians. The Russians will say, look, we don't love you. We don't hate you. We don't care about you. We know who you are. When somebody shows you who they are, believe them. So we know who you guys are. We're not trying to do cultural exchanges. We ain't trying to hug each other. We're not trying to do a group hug. We ain't trying to sing Kumbaya. But here's what we'll do. What did Putin say? Think about this. When Putin met with what's his name? Tucker Carlson. What did Putin say? See, and this is really wise. What Putin said, a lot of people can't get past this. This is really wisdom. What Putin said was, they were like, yeah, the blew up Nord Stream. And what Putin said, he said, you know what, though? There's still another pipeline open. He says, if Europeans want to call me, tell them, come get this gas and oil and all that crap. We got fertilizer. We got all kind of stuff. We don't love these people. They don't love us. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I'm paraphrasing, but everybody's just trying to eat, bro. Everybody's just trying to eat. And if the Europeans call back, I'm saying to them now, you guys are suffering. You're struggling. We got oil. We got gas. If you need it, give me a call. We'll open the spigots. We'll take your money and go. There you go. Right? If I got a business, let me give you an example. That's and I say all that in the context of the U.S. knows what I know. They understand the Russians, though they lie. They understand the Europeans' plight. predicament. They're creating their plight and predicament, so clearly they understand it. So these terrorist attacks are to try to build enmity between the two so that they hate each other, so that when this thing falls apart, that the Russians and the Europeans won't come back together, but it ain't going to work, right? So ultimately, what we're looking at is right now. Just think about this. I know somebody who did this, and I just firmly think it's absurd. This was a while back when, during the Trump administration and all the liberals are losing their freaking mind. Oh my God, Trump! Somebody give me a pink hat so I can go, to the street and protest with Hillary and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, fighting the system. As much sense as that makes. And someone said to me, "Yes, I called I think it was a plumber or something. The guy comes there and he had a Trump sticker. I didn't want to do business with him, so I called someone else." And so here's the thing. You got a leak or whatever. You need a plumber, and you're going to vet the plumber because they didn't vote for who you wanted to vote him for or whatever. And they're like, "What do you think of that?" And I'm like, if I got a leak or clogged sink or whatever, I need a plumber. When the plumber gets there, I ain't asking him. This is not a love fair or a love fest. I didn't bring him there to smooch him, to hug him, to live in holy wedded matrimony for the rest of my life with this plumber. I got a leak. I need business taken care of. Hey, you a plumber? Yeah. I look online, Yelp, Smelt, Help, whatever. Hey, and there's all of these people have written, this guy's good. He knows what he's doing. He blah, 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 right? Hey, this ain't a fishing buddy. I ain't hanging out with him. You know what I'm here for? To get my plumbing fixed. Come on in here. Can you fix this thing? Piece of cake. What's the price? $189. Get it done, bro. He comes in, he snakes the drain. Here's $189. And I say, look, man, that was great. Here's an extra 20. Appreciate it. I'm happy because he did the work. He's happy. He shakes my hand. Let me get your card. Hey, if I need something else, I don't care who he voted for. Right? That is a practical way of viewing the world. We need something. Here's somebody that can handle it. Let's get it done. Right? That's the way the Russians, I understand the Russians. I've been studying Russian culture for a long time. My mentor was educated in the Soviet Union. He taught me a lot about Russian culture. I've worked around Russians now for 7 years. I understand Russian culture and I understand the practicality therein, right? It's business, a lot about business. It's funny. The last time I didn't make it, but I was planning on going to Moscow and I was talking to my one friend and she says, and I was about, protocol. How do you act? Right. She says, you got one problem, Garland. I said, what's that? She says, you smile all the time. And I'm like, because I'm happy, right? I smile. I smile. I'm in a good mood. I'm happy. I enjoy life, right? It's the Zen thing. She says, when you go to Russia, don't smile all the time. Don't smile at people all the time. I said, why? She says, they'll think you're nuts. I forgot what word she used, but her Russians were kind of broken, but it was hilarious. Right. But she was basically, if you go to Russia, if you smile at people all the time, they'll think you're crazy. Right. And I'm like, well, I am crazy. So they'll have an approach. She's like, nah, come on, me. I'm always saying that kind of stuff. Nah. Don't go around smiling at everybody. You think you're crazy. Because Russians, it's not that they're not nice or happy or friendly people. It's that, they're very practical, very businesslike. You know what I mean? And I thought that was funny, actually. But bottom line is that when it comes down to it, at some point, even the infamous 100-year war ended after 100 years. Everybody knows at some point this conflict comes to an end. And the way things are looking, it ain't going to be as long as we thought. And here, let me add this. The problem that the neocons are going to have is this. These attacks on Russia that are not Ukrainian, let's face it, they're not Ukrainian terrorist attacks. They're NATO attacks on Russia. When this thing is over, there will be people in Ukraine who will be pissed at NATO, pissed at Europe, pissed at the US for dragging. They're going to wake up and say, you dragged us into this crap and got a hell beat out of us. You got a whole entire generations wiped out for you and we get nothing out of it. And it's all over, you walk away. Right? They're going to be mad and they're going to be in a position. People are going to say, well, what do you have to say? They're going to say, let me tell you something about what happened. Let me tell you, we're pissed at the Americans. Let me tell you what happened. It wasn't us. We didn't fire those missiles at you. It was the Brits. It was the Germans. It was this. It was. They're going to squeal on them. They're going to talk. They're going to say, it wasn't us, man. We were there saying, hey, can't we use these missiles to attack a Russian military outpost or something? And the Brits and the Americans said, no, we don't need to do that right now. We're firing the missiles. We'll choose to target you. Shut up. It wouldn't shock me if the Ukrainians were actually pushing back, saying, look, man, our guys are getting clobbered on the battlefield. Hey, well, here's a good target. Here's a Russian outpost. Here's a Russian headquarters. Let's hit that. And the Brits are like, and what good would that do? Well, it may help on the battlefield, and maybe so many of our guys won't be getting killed in the next couple of days. And the Brits and the Europeans, the Brits and the US are like, yeah, no, that's not happening. Here's what we got to do. Get the hell out of the way. We got to launch attacks. We are only using your territory as a platform to attack the Russians. What part of that do you understand? We don't care if you get killed. That's your job. It's your cannon fodder. Your job is to die. Go forth and die. While you're busy over there dying, keeping the Russians busy catching shrapnel, we'll be over here from a safe area launching attacks on the Russians and then running back to wherever we got to run back to. Your job's to die, not ours, you poor suckers. And meanwhile, we'll keep infuriating the Russians, angering the Russian people, infuriating the Russians at the Europeans. So when this is all over, we'll play off that. When it's all over and the Russians, the Europeans are like, oh, man, it's kind of cold. We sure could use some heat. Hey, the Russians got something over there. Perhaps we could give them a call, right? By then, the Russians will be so mad at the Europeans that the Europeans will call, hey, guys, let's turn this your Nord Stream thing back on. And, of course, the Russians will be so angry that they'll say, no, we'll never do business with you again because we're angry. The neocons, everyth's about emotion. So they'll be so emotionally angry, right? They're wrong. The Russians understand the game, and they understand who's shooting at them and who ain't. And when it's all said and done, and the Ukrainians turn on them, and they're already starting to do it, they're going to turn on them. They're going to turn on them. And when they turn on NATO, they're going to squeal. They're going to sing like a prison canary, and they're going to tell all. And when all comes out, it will be that the Ukrainians had little to do. Now, don't get me wrong. You got some Azov battalion guys who want to throw some stuff. You do have a Nazi element in Ukraine. Let's not be naive. And that Nazi element is happy to kill Russians. They're like, yay! They're not overly concerned. And let me add this. The Nazi element ain't overly concerned with Ukraine either. Let's not forget. What did the Nazi element say? The neo-Nazis in Ukraine say that their job is to lead the white race worldwide against the Jews and the orcs and the whoever else ain't the Aryans, right? So from their perspective, these Azov battalions and what have you, they're portrayed as ultra-nationalist. If they were ultra-nationalist, don't you think they'd give a crap about their nation? If they were all of these great nationalists, it implies that they're concerned with Ukraine. But what they're saying is, we want to lead the white race worldwide. That ain't Ukraine. So from the perspective of the so-called ultra-nationalists, the Azov battalions types, they're willing to sacrifice Ukraine too, because they got a bigger project. Their project aligns perfectly with the neocons. It's world hegemony. It's an ethno-world hegemony. It is an outright ethno-world hegemony as opposed to a kind of clandestine world hegemony, right? The difference is the neocons say we want to bring democracy and peace and liberal interventionism so the world will be a wonderful place. And the neo-Nazis say we want to lead the white race against the Jews and the orcs or whatever the hell. I'd say the neo-Nazis are a little more honest. They're like, we're treacherous, evil bastards, and we're going to run the world the way we see it in a fascist way. Whereas the neocons in DC are like, we're really good people, and we want to run the world the way we see it, the way we want to see it. And everybody will do what we have to say or else, because we're the good guys. So we want to do exactly the same thing as the neo-Nazis. The neo-Nazis say we're the bad guys. That's just who we are. We like being the bad boys. And the neocons say we're the good guys, but we're going to do the same thing as the bad boys, and we're going to work with the bad boys to do it, but because we're the good guys. None of it makes sense. But if you look at it in the end, they align perfectly. Both want to rule the world. And the Ukrainian neo-Nazis don't give a crap about Ukraine. I mean, let's look at what they're doing with Ukraine. You think they care about Ukraine? If they cared about Ukraine, they wouldn't have to get Ukraine being smashed to pieces. And now, as they see Ukraine being smashed to pieces, they just get some joy, some happiness. What are you going to do? What would make you feel good there, Adolf? Well, sure would feel good to kill some orcs today. All right, let's launch some Ukrainian. Well, we can't kill Russian soldiers because their air defense is too good. Let's kill some Russian civilians. How will that make you feel there, Adolf? Great, wonderful. All right, let's do it. Meanwhile, you got the Americans, the Brits, and the French calling them, hey, can you give us a hand? Yeah, we're going to use your country as a platform to attack Russia. And there's the Azov. You mean orcs? Yeah, tell us what to do. We're all in for it. Yeah, great. All right, you're going to help us carry these missiles over here. We're going to fire them off. You just get out of the way. And then you go back to the front and catch some bullets. Azov Battalion's like, yeah, good idea. Hey, thanks a lot. They're on our side. Isn't this great? You know, it's if you got suicidal idiots, you use them. Use them. They're using the suicidal idiots. But it ain't going to catch everyone. So their plan, let's end up by saying this, for world hegemony has a few holes in it. And their plan for infuriating the Russians, look, their plan, first of all, for launching terrorist attacks on Russians, right? The first terrorist attack was the sanctions. It was an economic terrorist attack against Russia. And what was the economic terrorist attack against Russia designed to do? Infuriate the Russian people so they would be pissed at the Putin government and overthrow it. Didn't work, right? So now their kinetic terrorist attack are designed to do what? Infuriate the Russian people so they turn and they do a color revolution again. They're all the same. Different. They only got one plan. It was an economic terrorist attack. People don't call economic attacks terrorist attack, but it was an economic terrorist attack. It was based on lies and theft. So they launched an economic terrorist attack. Didn't work. Now they're launching kinetic terrorist attack. They ain't going to work either. They ain't going to work. You've got diplomatic terrorist attack that they've launched around the world against Russia. All of these are just varieties of a terrorist attack. None of them are going to work. Ultimately, because the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, these are very, very, very old and disciplined cultures. And they understand in the long run that you don't act stupid. You don't make stupid moves. You keep your eye on the prize. You think about the long run. You think about the wisdom of your actions. You don't act. You know, these people think they're going to piss the Russians off and the Russians are going to act based on anger and emotion. You don't understand Russian culture if you think the Russians are going to act based on anger and right. You got to be wise, wisdom. Let me tell you something that happened to me, a story that happened to me on the train Thursday as an example of the difference between acting on emotion and wisdom, right? So I get on the train and I do what I do every day, right? You know, with people that know me, I got sciatic. I've been in car accidents, slammed, mushed, and crushed, right? I got the bottom of my spine ain't the best, right? People look at me and say, Carlin, you sure look like you're in good shape for your age. Well, I work out hard, but trust me, I have back pain issues, right? So that's one of the reasons I work out hard, to try to keep, deal with it, keep the back pain at bay as much as I can. So for the last 7 years, since I've been in DC, working in DC, every day it's the same thing. I sit in this, I find it's like a little booth seats in the train, right? So I got a seat facing me. So I take my left shoe off. If people know me, they know I do things the same way every day. It's a little bit of on the spectrum, shall we say, right? I do everything exactly the same way over and over again, and I can get freaked out if it's things are different. So every day I sit down in the same type of seat. I take my left shoe off so that my sock is exposed. And I put my left leg up on the seat in front of me. My right leg's down, my left leg's on the seat in front of me. That helps alleviate the sciatica and back issues. And it really, works well for me. Okay, great. Every day for 7 years. Nobody else rarely ever comes and sits there. Nobody said a word to me. I don't put my foot on the seat. I take my shoe off. And I don't even put my foot on the floor before that. Okay. So this guy with a mean look on his face. Thursday comes, and all these cheats everywhere, sits right next to my foot, right? And I got my earphones on, and he looks at my foot, and he looks up with a mean look, and he says, "Well, you got your stinky ass feet on the seat. People got to sit there." And I looked at him, and I took my earphone out, and I said, "I didn't hear you." And he says, "Take your stinky ass feet off the..." Okay. Now, let me just say this. At that point, I imagined striking this guy. I didn't even want to talk with him. I mean, I'm a human being, right? Dude, I wanted to, bam, do all kinds of things. Whap, 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 right? I wanted to say something to him. F you. Who the hell do you think you're talking? Yeah, I really wanted to let him have it verbally and, to be quite frankly, physically, right? How's this going to look, right? So, but here's what happened. My self-defense instructor, Vimy Grayson, right? It's like I could hear his words in my mind saying, "Walk away." It was always, self-defense is about what? Situational awareness. It's about keeping your focus on the big picture, right? And what did Vimy always say to me every day? "What is the idea, Garland?" And what would I answer? To go home. That's all it is. At the end of the day, the idea is to go home, right? You don't train for conflict. You train to avoid conflict. You train to be wise. You train to recognize danger. Self-defense is more so about situational awareness and how to react. You walk outside. Where do you park? Where's your car? Do you look around? Do you scan the parking lot? Do you this? You right? Where do you go? What time do you go? All of these things, right? What are you seeing? Is somebody threatening? Is blah, 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 right? How can you avoid a threat? You're in a bar. You see a couple people arguing. Get your stuff and leave. You're not going to stand. What if they start shooting? What if a fight starts out? Anything terrible start happening, right? So it is, as this is what Vimy always says about all, you can learn all blocking punches and all these kind of things, but they can't hit you if you ain't there. That's his thing, right? So when it came down to it, as furious, I could feel it. Well, can you imagine welling up? I'm like, I do the same thing. Nobody has ever said a word, ever. And this guy walks in after 7 years, and he's going to give me a raft of shit, right? I looked at him with a blank look on my face that said, "Oh, Ralph Cramden, boy, wouldn't I like to give you yours," right? But I looked down, I put my shoe on, I carefully tied my shoe, keeping an eye on him the whole time. I stood up, I walked out of that, I went to another train car, and I sat in another train car. As furious as I was, and as much as I wanted to engage this guy, I knew that the wise thing for me to do, and what I was trained to do, was to be disciplined and walk away. And as angry as I was, ever since then, every time I think back there, I think I won. And what I mean by won is not won over him. I did what I was trained to do. I acted in a manner that was disciplinary. I didn't look. What happens if I get in a fight? What happens if the guy stands up and I push him and he falls and hits his head and dies? Now I'm dealing with a manslaughter case. Now I got an attorney. What happens if he pulls out a gun and shoots me? What happens if we're fighting or whatever and he gets hurt and I get sued, or I'm in court and there's witnesses saying, well, this guy hit this guy. Oh, there's cameras on the train, right? All of that could happen. My life could be a living hell. On the news, Garland Nixon, man, beats up man on the train, strikes guy on the train, breaks his nose. Anything could happen, right? And I did the easy thing. I walked away. I just simply said, you know what? The wise move here is to act prudently. Here's my point in all of that. I wasn't provoked to act in a violent manner and act out emotionally because I was trained and disciplined. I had a history of dealing with and learning how to and being trained how to deal with such stressful situations. Okay. US is 250 years old. Iran, China, Russia, what's Russia, 1,000 years? They've been invaded, they've been attacked, they've been all these kind of things. These countries have a long history of dealing with these types of issues, and they understand this happens, then that happens, then that happens 100 years, 50 years later, blah blah blah. Oh, your border can expand, then your border can contract, then you can not do business with this country, then you can do business with that country. They understand that in the long term, that they understand the arc of history and how they need to act to control their position within this long arc of history. And at that point, I understood, not in the moment, if I act emotionally out of anger, but then I don't know what happens next. I have no control over what happens next. And it could be really, really bad for me, right? So I acted based on discipline. If you think of the martial arts, right, and that level of discipline, where's that from? From China, from Asia, right? That is the discipline and the wisdom coming from Asia, from the thousands of years of discipline saying, hey, in the course of a conflict, this is what you should or shouldn't do, right? So these people have a long history. So they don't act out of emotion. They don't act out of anger. They don't act out of desperation. They act out of, what do I need to do? What's in my best interest? If I punch that, if I don't punch, look, people would say they do something against Russia, and people would say, why isn't Russia responding? Why isn't Russia punching back? They've done this. Why didn't I respond? Why didn't I punch back? Why did I walk away? Why did I turn my back? Because in the long run, it didn't benefit me. I wanted to think about the long run. So what is Russia doing? They're considering the long run. I've said this all along. When it comes to these terrorist attacks, Russia knows they're winning, and they will not be distracted, particularly now. They are on the verge of victory. They are launching right now. They are launching some of what I consider will be some of the final offensives. They got these people down. They've got the U.S. empire down, punching it, right? They've got it down, finishing them off. They've got it down, getting their victory. They will not be distracted from that, from what they're trying to do. I was heading home. I wasn't going to be distracted from heading home with something that would stop me from getting home and doing what I need to do and make my life worse. So they're not going to, they understand who's doing it. They understand why they're doing it, and they will not be distracted from their victory. Okay, they got hit. Is it a coincidence also that they launch an offensive, that the walls are crumbling in Ukraine, the lines are buckling, and they launch vicious terrorist attacks? Of course it isn't. They want to distract Russia, for Russia to do something that they can get some kind of a public relations victory, or something that they can do, something that Russia will strike back, so they can go to the UN and say, look what Russia's done. It's terrible. It's a violation of everything that's holy. The UN needs to do. So they need a distraction. Russia ain't going to give them that. Russia's going to take a hit. Look, if you're trained in self-defense, you got to learn how to take a hit. You're going to get punched. You're going to hit. You could get cut. You can't stop fighting when you get hit. You got to learn how to take a hit. Most people don't understand how to take a hit. That's why somebody attacks you and their hand comes in and you get a hand on that finger. Bow! And you snap that that's a little old finger, right? Little old finger. You don't have to be huge. You get a hand on that finger and you bend it in a way that it's not. This is a big, I don't care how big you are, your finger ain't so strong. You get that, pow, you snap it. Bend it in a way it's not supposed to be. Hyperextend something, right? So small thing like a little finger and you snap it, right? A lot of people will go into shock. Big tough guy ready to kick your butt. You get that finger and you snap that finger and they look, and their finger's supposed to be facing this way and this finger's facing that way. One finger's like at a 45-degree angle. There are a lot of people that'll go into a shock. Literally look at them and they'll go into shock. They can't fight anymore, because they don't understand. They have not been trained to take a punch. They have not been trained to fight through pain. If you are trained, number one, you ain't going to fight unless you feel like your life is in danger or you're protecting someone else. You're going to walk away otherwise. So when you get that pain, you ain't fighting out of the blue. You're fighting because your life's in danger. That pain ain't going, you're going to fight through the pain because you feel like this person's trying to kill you. I got bigger fish to fry. I'm staying alive, right? You're going to fight through that broken finger. It hurts like hell. It may freak you out, but you ain't giving up because you're afraid, you're concerned that you're going to die and you're going to protect your life. And it can break another finger. You're still going to fight. You're trained to fight through pain, right? Okay, most people aren't. The Russians lost 30 million people in fucking World War II. They're accustomed to fighting through pain. And right now, these attacks, they're not happy about it. They don't want to lose civilians, but they're going to fight through pain. It's painful for them. It's angering. It's upsetting. And even the government of Russia has to push back. They got to say to their people, hey, we're doing everything we can. And some of the Russians people, I'm sure, we need to do more. We need to hit these people back. They're killing some of our civilians. And the Russians are going to say, look, calm down. We got this. We got our hands on the steering wheel, and we're hitting where we need to hit, and we're going to win this thing. And when we win it, they won't be able to do any of this stuff. So you let us win, you let us do this, and we're going to cut all of this out. We're going to have to take some punches a little bit here and there until we get this victory, but we're set for victory. And I think that's what we're looking at now. I think that's where the Russians are. That's why the Russians aren't so motivated to react. Yeah, well, will they hit some Ukrainian targets with some missiles? Sure. Will they turn out the lights in some cities or something like that with missiles? Sure. They'll do some things to keep their people at least feeling like they're doing something. But overall, they ain't going to be distracted from what they're doing. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Oh my gosh. It's 11 o'clock. Well, thanks, everybody. Well, let me look. Sparky says free Assange. Sparky says people should respect their tools rather than fetishize them. That's interesting. We'll leave that one alone. Sparky says, are they commandos or terrorists? According to George Carlin, it depends on whose side they're on. Exactly. How about this? Brad Arnold says the U.S. is forced to borrow $1 trillion every 100 days. That is what strategic defeat looks like. An economist that's head of the Russian military, who better to conduct a war of impoverishment? Yeah, it's brilliant, because an economist understands. I think the Russians are like, the head of the Russians. Keep in mind something. The Russians have a council, basically, that works with Vladimir Putin, that devises military strategy. They have generals that devise military strategy. So I think they've gone to a point where they're saying, look, we have military strategists who decide what's going to happen on the battlefield. But one of the things that is critical is understanding how we can strengthen our industrial military capabilities. And so it makes sense. You got people who will decide what to blow up and where to blow, what to shoot back, how to shoot back, what trenches to dig, and what dragon's teeth to put up. We got generals that do that stuff. We want a guy at the top that says, we want to make sure this whole machine runs steady, and we want to make sure that we are building the stocks we need to protect ourselves in case of NATO attacks, that financially our military situation is sound, that our military situation doesn't do like the U.S., where we spend all of our money on the military and the rest of the country goes broke. It makes sense. It makes sense. If Israel is the unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East, Ukraine is the little dinghy that thought it could, but it sprung major Iskander leaks. It makes sense to me. And that's that. We'll go to Rockfin. And thanks, everybody over at Rockfin. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I got to run. Do me a favor. Couple of things. Numero uno. You see everything scrolling across the bottom. If you can afford to Patreon or buy me a coffee or PayPal or whatever the case may be, that's highly appreciated. Additionally, follow me on Telegram, follow me on Facebook. Also, share this on all your social media platforms. Go to rockfin.com and become a member over at Rockfin. If you can, it doesn't cost anything to be a member. If you can afford it, the Rockfin doesn't charge it doesn't have advertisements, so you can become a member for like $14.99 a month. If you can afford that, that's fine. If you can't, just save the money, take care of your family. Make sure you share this on all your social media platforms. Peace. I'm out. Tools, as in knives or other weapons, says the Sparkster. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Don't forget to share this. I'm out.